Jesus people, sisters, nobody wants to have dementia. If you could possibly avoid it, sisters, wouldn't this be the cry of your heart? Join us today for part 2 of our interview with Lizette Cloete, a Christian dementia coach. Lizette shares more about what you can do to prevent dementia. Welcome to the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, a place where Christian single women aged 50 plus connect. I am your host, Janine Jordan, a Christian confidence coach and leadership mentor in Alberta, Canada.
And I'm your co-host, Ellie McCormick, a Christian longevity coach and mentor in the USA. Being single women over 50, we know what it's like to feel overlooked, to have unrealized dreams, to experience the challenges of singlehood, and to be concerned about what our future will look like. We couldn't find anything online for single Christian women over 50, so we created Jesus People Sisterhood just for you, a place where sisters encourage and empower one another through the last third of life, because you are a treasure trove of wisdom and of exceedingly great value. This is an authentic community, a supportive family, with other women on the same journey where Jesus is the center of it all. Here you will find real talk, real community, and real sisters.
Join us as we discuss building relationships, whole health, and growing spiritually. We'll review helpful books and articles, chat with guest speakers, share success stories, and have some laughs along the way. So grab your favorite beverage and we'll get started. Today, we send a big shout out to our sisters in Russia. Thank you for listening. We're so glad that sisters from around the world are listening to the podcast. And here's a review from Content Children, who write, "There's nothing like this. I think this is going to be a helpful podcast for single Christian women over 50. And it may help some who are not single. Looking forward to future podcasts." Thank you, Content Children, for your positive review. And we're so pleased you find the podcast valuable. If you'd like your review read on one of our episodes, please leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. It will only take you a minute, and it raises the podcast in the rankings so that other sisters can find us too.
Hello, sisters. Welcome to part 2 of Dementia, What It Is, Caregiving, and Prevention. Today, Janine and I continue our interview with Lizette Cloete. If you did not listen to part 1 of our interview, please go back and listen to the previous episode first. Lizette is a veteran occupational therapist turned Christian dementia coach, blending the best evidence-based dementia caregiving principles from a biblical perspective to help ease the burden of caregiving. Her passion is to change how people think about cognitive loss, which improves the outcome for both the person with dementia and their caregivers. Originally from South Africa, she and her husband live in South Carolina, where they support her parents who both have cognitive loss. And now we'll listen to the second half of our interview with Lizette. Okay, so turning a little bit in the conversation is you've worked with people with dementia for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously made you aware of, not wanting to get dementia.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could tell us what you've learned, maybe you can even tell us of how your thoughts developed as you're doing this and thinking, okay, what about me?
Mm-hmm.
How do I prevent getting dementia?
For sure. So the good news, because there is good news, is, or let me ask, I'm gonna kind of ask a question to kind of, I think it'll be helpful if I ask the question. Do you, the both of you, do you believe that dementia is preventable? And what do you know about how hereditary dementia is?
I believe there is some dementia that is affected by your genes,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the time, it's preventable. That's what I've read.
Yes, that is, you're 100% correct. So the reality of the matter is that even Alzheimer's a lot of Alzheimer's is preventable. Not all Alzheimer's is related to genetics. There are a few of the types of dementia that are a lot more genetically hereditary, but about 80% of dementias are preventable.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
About 80% of dementias are preventable. One of the big reasons for that is vascular dementia is one of the big ones. So anything that you can do related to protecting your cardiovascular system can help decrease your risk for developing dementia. There's a very strong correlation been found between blood sugar and cognitive impairment. So there really are two schools of thought. There's the medical model that says dementia is not preventable, it's inevitable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Plaques and tangles cause dementia. All of these tau, the things that they're finding in the brain are causing dementia. And then there's the absolute 100% opposite school of thought, which is more holistic, that says what we see in the brain are the brain's protective mechanism for all these other things. There's a doctor, his name is Dale Bredesen, Bredesen, Dale Bredesen. He wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's. He is a neurologist, so he's not a trained mechanic. He's a neurologist who has been doing research on dementia for 30 plus years that has concluded that there are up to 36 contributing factors to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Things like toxicity, things like not having the right minerals, things like blood sugar, all of these 36 different contributing factors. So I read that book several years ago, and then there's another book, it's called Aging with Grace. It was written by David Snowden. He's a PhD doctor, not a medical doctor, but he did a 30-year social type of research project on cognitive impairment in nuns, N-U-N, as in live in a convent, right? Nuns. And the reason he studied the nuns was because they were able to take out, for the period that they were living in the convent, they all lived in the exact same socioeconomic, they got the same food, their lives were the same from that moment on. The factors that were different were how they grew up and what their educational levels were coming into becoming a nun. So they did this longitudinal study for over 30 years, and they recruited these nuns to be a part of this study. So for the time that they were doing this study, they did cognitive assessments on the nuns who agreed. And when they passed away, the nuns had agreed to let them do an autopsy on their brain. And so they had data. They had decades of data with, I think, it was either 112 or 96, something like that, nuns. And so they had all of the cognitive evals, and the pathologist who did the autopsy on the brain, it was not told whether this nun had any signs of cognitive impairment or not. He had one job. He was to look at the brain and say, Alzheimer's or not. Look at the brain.
Mhm.
Is it normal or not? And what they found is there was a nun who they did cognitive evals on her for all these decades. And when she passed away, he said she has Alzheimer's and she had no cognitive impairment. Documented.
Wow.
No cognitive impairment from repetitive, not once or twice, cognitive assessments over decades. Nobody could tell that she had had stuff going on in her brain. And the reason I bring that up is because what some of those studies have started to show was what can be neuroprotective, right? So protecting my brain, learning, and not just, people will frequently ask me, well, I exercise my brain. I do Sudoku or crossword puzzles or whatever to keep my brain active. That's all well and good. If you're a math nerd and you're doing language, that's working your brain because you got to actually think now because you're used to doing math. But if you're a language person and you're doing crossword puzzles to exercise your brain, that's routine and familiar, not doing anything to actually work your brain. So true cognitive activities, learn a new language, learn to play a different instrument, learn to play an instrument to start with, dancing, like ballroom dancing where you have to respond to another human doing something different than what you're expecting. Diet, tremendous research and documented studies showing that diet can significantly improve your cognitive abilities. The types of diets that have been found to be neuroprotective, we talked about blood sugar, are things like the Mediterranean diet, a keto diet, high fat, low carb, the MIND diet, which is, I forgot what it stands for. There are all these different types of neuroprotective diets that people can follow that can significantly decrease their risk of developing dementia over time. Exercise. There's some tremendous body of evidence that shows exercise can significantly impact your brain, both cardio as well as weightlifting. So you want to do both. And then any type of exercise like Tai Chi or yoga or things like that, where you're having to do things that you have to think about. So diet, exercise, sleep. Sleep is increasingly more important for our brain. When we go to sleep at night, that is when our brain takes out the trash. When we don't go to sleep at night, our brain doesn't get rid of the toxins that our body produces. That's how we get rid of it, is when we sleep. And then my favorite is stress.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Stress management. We all know we live in a highly stressful world, but managing our stress. Stress has a purpose. We don't think about stress as actually having a purpose, but stress has a purpose. The purpose of stress is to tell you, Houston, there's a problem. You need to do something different. So there is a measure of chronic stress that we all experience just from being on the world, right? But the type of stress that we're talking about is that I know I'm stressed. My body's telling me I'm stressed, but I'm not doing anything to change anything. That's when we're in trouble, because our body is telling us it's time to do something different. I'll use myself as an example. For many years, I worked full-time, like a lot of hours. And my body was telling me all the time, you are stressed. How did it come out? I had eczema. I had rosacea on my face. I had lots of skin issues. When I stopped actually working full-time and I started my own business, I still work an asinine amount of hours, but my body isn't responding anymore, and I don't have eczema anymore at all. The rosacea all cleared up. So stress is our body's way of telling us, Houston, something's wrong. You've got to do something different. And this is probably one of the biggest takeaways for specifically single women to hear. No is a possible answer. And the person receiving the no, that's their problem. You are responsible for yourself. And the other part of the caregiving journey, another analogy I want people to think about related to caregiving. Caregiving is like walking up a mountain, right? So you have to be prepared. You have to have the right gear and you have to do it. And it's hard work and you get to the top. And so when you get to the top is when your caregiving journey is done. But guess what? You still got to get down the mountain. And if you have ruined yourself, if you're a 50-year-old woman, and this, I'm including myself in this, right? If you're a 50-year-old person and you're taking care of anybody, doesn't need to be dementia, it can be anybody. What do you want your life to look like when they're gone? And you're 60 years old or you're 62. Do you want to be able to go traveling? Do you want to be able to, what do you want your life to look like? Do you want to be able to go exercise and have fun and do these activities that you've planned for your whole entire life? Then you cannot let somebody else take that away from you. You have to begin with the end in mind, but not their end, your end.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. So good what you're sharing. Yeah.
Wow.
Do you have any other questions, Janine, before I ask
Oh, I'm just sitting here. That's lots of food for thought. And I just think we would just love to have more time to talk to you.
Well,
And I
I'd
can
be
think of
happy to
more
come back.
questions.
I'd be happy to come back whenever you want me to.
Mhm.
And it doesn't even need to be related to dementia. Caregiving is something every single one of the people in your audience are going to face at some point or another.
Mm.
You know, when we think about single women, right? Single women can be single, never married,
Mhm.
widowed,
Mhm.
divorced, right?
Mhm.
So you have women in your audience who are now single, but they had children and now they're taking care of their parents, but their kids are still at home. That's a whole separate ball of wax than single, never married, taking care of a parent or a sibling, right? So every person, their unique situation dictates what they can and cannot do. But no is a possible answer.
Mhm.
If you are
Preach
not
it. Preach it.
if you are not able to take care of the person, then you need to say no. I'm not recommending, nor am I suggesting that you just drop them like a hot potato.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Your responsibility then becomes helping solve the problem without you being the solution.
Mhm.
Right.
But no is a possible answer. I tell people all the time, society will try to make you feel guilty.
Mhm.
For example, this elderly person is living in an assisted living or a memory care or whatever, and the staff will say something to the effect of, oh, but they're so sweet. I don't understand why their family doesn't come. They never see their family, but they're so sweet. Well, they're 76 and they may be sweet now, but they could have been a hellion when this child was a child. And
Mm.
you don't know what that person did to their children growing up, what their relationship was. So
Mhm.
when I have people that have been abused or were neglected as a child, or their parent molested them, or whatever the situation was, it is okay to say you're not going to be their caregiver.
Mm.
It is okay.
Mm.
Your job is then to help make sure they're taken care of, but that doesn't mean that you were the solution.
Yeah.
Mm. Right.
No. And it's really powerful that you're saying that.
Mhm.
You just need to
Mhm.
hear that. Yeah.
Because that's a reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But
So, uh,
sorry,
I'm
go ahead,
sorry.
Ellie.
You want to ask something?
Well, no, I just had a comment to make that just I wanted to get back to the positive again because you just that whole sharing with us of how the caregiving can actually be a positive thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because it just it does make it much easier to believe that you can walk that journey, right? With it having a positive
Oh,
end.
absolutely, it can. And especially for believers,
Mm.
we have the hope of the resurrection, and we
Mhm.
know that this is not as good as it gets,
Oh, amen. Amen.
right? This is not as good as it gets. one of the best opportunities I've ever had, which will end on a positive note, is I had the opportunity of being a staff member on a dementia-supported cruise.
Mm.
So the person whose business this is, she puts together dementia-supported cruises, and then she has one staff member to 3 people on the cruise. So there were 33 people on the cruise, and we were like 10 or 11 staff members. And the purpose behind the cruise is to take these people living with dementia and their families on a cruise together, so that the caregiver can get some respite, some rest, and they can create moments of joy and still live their lives fully. So I went on this cruise with this group, and it was exhausting. It was the best thing ever. I will do it in a heartbeat again. And on my way home, I was at the airport exhausted, getting on an airplane, and there was a couple sitting next to me, and we were all waiting for our flights, and started a conversation with them. I don't even remember how, but in the conversation, it came out that they were on the same ship as me, and they had seen us on the ship, and they had observed how we were helping these people that obviously needed help. I mean, it's obvious. And the particular situation that they spoke of was this particular cruise line had a private island, and so you would disembark and go to the private island in the Caribbean. Wonderful, beautiful blue water, etc. But a lot of the people had some physical limitations, and so there's a big old, it's a beach wheelchair. And so we would take the people who couldn't walk down to the water, in the water, get their feet in, take photos. Unbeknownst to me, they had been sitting right where we were. They had watched us the entire day take care of these adults who needed help, but give them and their families these opportunities to connect and laugh and go to the water and feed the fish and throw the Cheerios to the chickens and things like that. And so we were able to create these memories for these families that they are going to have for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So yes, it is possible. Does it take effort? Absolutely. Where does it start? It starts with me as the care partner, how I think about it. God talks about thinking his thoughts after him. We're supposed to think God's thoughts after him. What we end up doing in a caregiving journey is think not God's thoughts after him, how it's impacting us and so on. But if you just flip it around and think God's thoughts after him, then it will be easier. It won't be easy, but it will be easier. And from a dementia caregiving perspective, the best advice I can give your listeners is always go for the emotion. Connect with the person on the emotional level. And it will significantly impact your relationship and your caregiving journey. And it will make it easier.
Hey, thank you. So we'd like to ask at the end of the interview for our guests, is there anything you would want to say to single Christian women over 50?
Do not struggle alone.
Yeah, amen.
You do not need to struggle alone. Your church is there to support and help you. They cannot support and help you if they do not know. Do not expect them to know how to help you. What I mean by that is people will say, just let me know what I can do to help. The strategy is, here's my list. Which one of these things would you like to do? So I go up to Janine and, Janine, let me know how I can help. And Janine immediately pulls out of her bag Well, I need help with these are the tasks I need help with. What can you take off of me? Because people are willing to help. They don't know how. So do not do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. Don't for a single second think a married couple can do it alone. They need help. Everybody needs help. When they're caregiving, you cannot do it alone. You should not be expected to do it alone. And let your church know, and then start to build the structure around yourself from the beginning. And respite needs to be scheduled. Respite doesn't just happen. And it needs to be scheduled earlier on and more frequently than you think.
Right.
We are created to be in community with one another.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And that's where we think, Ellie, of our Jesus People sisterhood community, right? With our ladies supporting each other.
Main
Yeah.
message.
Right. Right. All you ladies out there listening. Oh, well, we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us, Lizette, today. It was just a real joy to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
This was a really good conversation.
I admit I'm actually a little surprised. It was, you think of dementia, and you're kind of like,
Yeah, that's
I
right.
just thought it's an important subject, but you've just been such a wonderful guest. I really feel blessed by our conversation today. So
Absolutely. Bless your heart. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
You're very, very welcome.
So you want to go ahead and share any of your contact information or
The best
for our
place,
listeners?
the best place for people to get to really know a little bit more about me and what I do is my podcast, which is called Christian Dementia Caregiving, and or my website, which is Think Different Dementia, because I want people to think different about dementia. So thinkdifferentdementia.com and the podcast Christian Dementia Caregiving. I'm very active on social media, but those are like if somebody truly is listening and they're struggling with dementia, I'd recommend they start to listen to the podcast. I do answer all of my questions from a biblical perspective, and most of what I really talk about are some of the nuts and bolts and how to do things, but it's really caregiving is 100% a mind game. You have to be able to control what you think about it. And so we work a lot on, I've not heard of another podcast quite like mine, because I can talk about the skills all day long, every day, but nobody is talking about dementia caregiving from the caregiver perspective. They're talking about it from the dementia care, the nuts and bolts, how to do it perspective. They're not looking at how do you as the caregiver actually do it. What you need, the mindset you need. And so that makes it a little bit different, but then they'll be able to connect with me off of the podcast or off of my website.
Okay. Well, thanks for that information as well. So I think we've come to the end of this episode. And again, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
We hope you enjoyed our very informative interview with Lizette Cloete. We hope to have her back on the podcast again. Please share any thoughts that resonated with you from today's podcast episode in our private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community. Start reaching out to other single women and create your local group of Jesus People Sisters. Please let us know about your group to add to our directory by contacting us at support@jesuspeoplesisterhood.com.
Have you had a good experience with a business? They've treated you honestly and helped you at a reasonable price. Please let us know. We would like to start a directory of JPS-friendly businesses. Let's care for one another.
That's all we have for today, sisters. Be blessed by him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of his glory, blameless and with great joy. Until next time.
Hey, sister, before you go, thank you for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, the best way to say thank you is by leaving a 5-star written review at Apple Podcasts. That raises us in the rankings and helps other sisters find us too. And please tell a friend or post it on your social media. If you're a single Christian woman over 50, this podcast was created specifically for you. The Jesus People Sisterhood is your community to find support and friendship with other sisters who can understand. Be sure to follow us on your podcast app and join our free private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community.
Jesus People Sisterhood has also started a private Facebook group for housing and co-living opportunities. You can check that out at Jesus People Sisterhood Senior Housing. You can also find us on Facebook at Jesus People Sisterhood and individually for Janine at riseupcoachingandconsulting.com and for Ellie at samaramountain.com. And ladies, this is the necessary disclaimer. Our podcast content is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice from mental health, medical, legal, financial, or other areas. The opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host. It is our heart that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Together, let's build a powerful sisterhood with Jesus. Make a friend, add a sister, across the border and around the world.